This week on the bench, K-State versus Iowa State recap.
Plus a preview of Kansas State versus ranked Texas Tech.
We'll look at the Big 12 schedule release for 2014.
And we take a look at the men's and women's basketball season coming up.
The Manhattan High boys cross-country team won state, and we talked with head coach Susan Melgaris.
And the picks from the bench.
And of course, our weekly installment of Cuddle's Picks. All right,
Okay.
let's get it all.
Now we can do the real show.
Cats. Pull that screen closer and make sure the boss isn't watching. It's episode 2 of The Bench. I'm Brady Bowman.
I'm Jeremy Roberts.
And we made it to episode 2.
Yeah, we did, and hopefully we make another 100.
98 more. We'll get there.
Yeah, we're close.
We'll get there.
Almost there.
All right, let's just go ahead and get down to it. K-State and Iowa State, a game K-State won 41-7. We were saying in episode 1 how close and tight we thought that game would be because it had been 6 games previous. But
Yeah.
Not the case Saturday.
Yeah, good old Farmageddon. And that EMAC, every man a cyclone, did not work very much.
That did not stick.
No,
How
it
did
did
that
not
stick?
But you know what? They only have 1 win so far, and they still love their team. They don't give up on that team. So I respect that. But Kansas State, the story of the game in this game, I thought was their defense.
Yeah, that's a good point because we were talking about that on the sideline. You were thinking back to the first game of the season against North Dakota State, and I think we were both talking about the differences in gains we saw. I mean, if Coach Snyder's always a guy that says let's get better each game, I think they certainly have done that.
Yeah, well, at the beginning of the season, I think everyone was pretty uniform on the idea of the biggest question mark and the biggest liability this Kansas State football team had was its defense. There's so many new faces, people who were not on this team last year that only lost 2 games. So for them to get to the point where they nearly got a shutout in a Big 12 game, regardless of the opponent, is very impressive.
And how hard was it for K-State fans to not get that shutout, though? That was something that Snyder in the post-game press conference said that really did, get to him a little bit. That he didn't put up, as he called it, the good old goose egg.
Yeah, and that shocked me, actually, because you saw what Snyder did at the end of the game. He took a knee right there at the 1-yard line.
Which I thought was a classy move.
It was a classy move, and he could have easily it's 1 yard. And I was like, just 1 yard, you get 7 more points. And it wouldn't have been 41, it would have been 48. 48-7. And, in an age where we're talking style points every week, and we're talking how important it is to look good when you win, Snyder still got that, I don't want to embarrass the guy. The game's already over.
Right.
There's no point. And plus he's always got that mentality of what if a guy gets hurt, even if I'm like, was it worth it?
Yeah, I thought it was a great move. I thought it was a great classy move and a show of respect for
and
Paul.
And he got some guys in there.
Yeah.
That hadn't played before.
I think to me the biggest thing though about the K-State Iowa State game is that it gets Wildcats to 500 at 4-4, a 2-3 mark in the conference, and 1 game away from being 500 there. For a season that just a few games ago was looking very iffy when it came to the bowl game conversation. It was looking like this is a team that might not qualify, but you can't deny how well K-State's played the last 2 or 3 games. And even against Iowa State or against Oklahoma State and Baylor, games that they were a possession or 2 away from winning. So it seems like this team is really kind of taking that Snyder mantra of getting better and better as the season goes on. It seems like it's happening quicker than maybe it's happened in the past.
Yeah, and you go back to that losing streak you're talking about. Not only did they lose that first game to North Dakota State, which really took the wind out of the sails of this team that really thought, coming off a Big 12 championship and a BCS bowl berth, that they thought they could really just come in here and just take it up a notch despite the losses on defense and despite the losses on offense, including a Heisman Trophy finalist. So for them to go 3 games in conference play, loss, a lot of teams can just give up at that point and see this one's in the books. We'll pick up our pieces next year and we'll see how much better we are then. But this team has really caught an easier stretch of their schedule, I should say, in teams that don't have winning records necessarily. And they're taking care of those games instead of just writing their checks off.
Well, and let's not forget, this was an Iowa State team that was a point away from beating Texas, a team that everybody's all of a sudden very high on because they've played very well here in conference play. They're undefeated in conference play. So for K-State to, nearly shut them out and win 41-7 and do it in such a commanding fashion, I think that really speaks volumes for the type of team we have today.
Oh, absolutely. And that Texas game, Iowa State should have won that game. It was their coach even said it was taken away from them by the referees. And
wait, you can talk about that for hours.
No, we're not.
Right.
But this Iowa State team's going to beat someone. They're not going to finish the season with one win. And I bet you Kansas State players are just happy it wasn't them, that they get their extra win or extra 2 wins, or who knows. Iowa State still has a bunch of games left, so they're not necessarily just going to end up a one-win team. But Kansas State, on the other hand, they have very, very much in the realm of getting the bowl game at this point. They just need 2 more wins to qualify.
And let's talk about some of the guys that got K-State in this spot to be a couple games from bowl eligibility. Jeremy, who do you got for your offensive player of the game against Iowa State?
Oh, and that's a tough one, too, because the offense, everyone was kind of doing their part. But, you had John Hubert over 100 yards, and then you had receivers all over the place making amazing catches. But I finally picked Tremaine Thompson. His final stat line was 3 receptions for 71 yards and a touchdown. And his longest catch was 28 yards. And again, that's not a big portion of the entire receiving yards, but I thought his catches were really important in that game.
Well, he's definitely a guy that's, I don't want to say he's had unexpected success this year. I think everybody's thought of him as a very good player, but the way he and Lockett are able to work the opposing defenses, I think defenses are having a really hard time knowing which one's going to be the prominent player on that route.
And you saw the drought that this team had. They were so close in those games, but if you have Lockett and you have Thompson on that team playing on the field, not hurt, for those 3 games that they were not playing, well, they might have been in the Texas game, but the games that they were out, we could talk about a different record for K-State. Right. They could be in much better shape.
Well, and that kind of goes with my offensive player of the game. I went ahead and stuck with John Hubert because this is a guy I feel like has been really needing a string of a couple good games. I feel like he's been getting that. The last 2 against West Virginia and Iowa State. Hubert, 15 rushes, 108 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a long of 54. And most importantly, averages 7 yards a carry. And granted, a big run like that will help your average. But he was a guy that we'd seen through much of the non-conference season in the early part of the Big 12 schedule. Was a guy that's really kind of struggling. That you wonder if he was a guy that was really missing Colin Klein most, because Colin Klein caused so much attention from the other defenses that a lot of the times Hubert was able just to sneak around them. And that goes to good misdirection plays and good handoffs or fake handoffs by Colin Klein. So I feel like this season he struggled early because he was getting all that attention, but now that everybody's starting to play better. And that's the amazing thing about it. When everybody starts to play better, everybody gets up more, and I think Hubert's really felt the benefits of that.
No, and that's a good pick. I even brought him up, and it was hard for me not to pick him. It was just the only reason I went with the receiver is just because of how amazing some of those catches were, that they really bailed out the quarterbacks in a couple of those throws. But yeah, that's a great pick too, and it's really hard to say anyone's definitive player of the game here.
Well, and either of our picks, I don't think that's to diminish what Daniel Sams and Jake Waters did. I think they were again showing for the 2nd straight week in a row that we can do a sort of 2 quarterback system and sort of make it work.
Mm-hmm. And Lockett also had the same amount of yards for the most part as Tremaine Thompson, and he just didn't have that touchdown, but easily could have.
And let's go ahead while we're talking about the quarterbacks. Let's talk about their stats just real quick. Waters 9 for 15, 157 yards, no touchdowns, but no interceptions. Daniel Sams 4 for 5, 64 yards and a touchdown, a long of 28. Waters had a long of 37. Of course, they were effective on the ground. Sams 13 carries, 60 yards, and a touchdown, while Waters 7 carries, 48 yards. So everybody did their job.
Yeah, no, it was a great game. It was a great offensive game, and if they could have got that defensive stop, and it really wasn't defensive fault that they gave up that score. It was a turnover that caused that, which was unfortunate.
By Rose, and that was tough to watch after Rose gets that touchdown, and the way he grabbed his knee right at the end there, you gotta wonder when he's going to come back.
Yeah, and he was walking around after the game, but you don't know how bad he was hurt, or if he'll ever see the field again, because.
Yeah, just a shame for his senior. But And I think that's what made him feel worse is the fact that his turnover attributed to that touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
But to talk about what you're bringing up in the first place with the turnovers in general, I mean, we saw no turnovers from Sam's or Waters.
Yeah,
for the first time this season.
Yes, yeah, that's very big. It's very big. And Kansas State has been giving up penalties. They've been giving up turnovers all year, and even in those games where they give up just crazy amounts of turnover and crazy amounts of penalties, they're still hanging on there in the fourth quarter, almost able to win these games. And you're just wondering, how are you even in this game, considering what has happened up to this point? Well, I mean, Kansas State went from racking up the penalties and the turnovers early in these other games and just having ridiculous amounts of turnovers and penalties to now hardly having any.
Well, they only had one penalty for 10 yards against Iowa State, so.
Yeah, and B.J. Finney even made a comment about that, how they didn't have any false starts or any penalties this week.
And that was something in the first 2 or 3 games of the season that was really hurting K-State as well. But moving on, let's go to and speaking of defense, let's go ahead and talk about our defensive players of the game.
Well, I think we might be in agreement because my defensive player of the game, Ryan Mueller,
Guilty.
He got Big 12 Defensive Player of the Week, the best in the week from the conference. He had 7 tackles, 1 was an assisted tackle, 1 sack, and 2 tackles for a loss. And every week, this player, he is showing up every week, and he's such a good story too, because I believe he is a walk-on.
Yeah, he's a great story. He's a guy that has a motor on him. I think that's the most important thing about him for the K-State defense is that he plays 100 miles an hour every snap. He plays with a lot of aggression. He has a lot of fun out there, and I really think that if you're looking for a guy that can lead in a defense that we've already said is young, I mean, it's great to see somebody finally emerge in that role.
Absolutely, and he's one of my. I mean, a lot of times I'll have the camera focused right on him on defense because I know he makes those plays and he's really fun to watch. And coming up next week, Kansas State is going to Texas Tech University, which is ranked.
They lost 2 weeks ago at Oklahoma, 38-30, and then just recently at home against Oklahoma State, 52-34. A game that I think a lot of people were expecting them to be much more competitive in. As a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, the Red Raiders were ranked ahead of Oklahoma State.
Yeah, and if we look at our picks last week, I picked Oklahoma State to win that game.
What was the overall rankings?
Well, we'll get to that later in the show.
Okay, yeah.
But Oklahoma State was running away with that. This is what's important is Oklahoma State was running away with that game, and Texas Tech tried to come back, and it was just too much. They just could not stop OSU. And so Texas Tech's really reeling right now after a 7-0 start, getting into the top 10 rankings in the country with a brand new coach who's very young. It was almost like a Cinderella story for him. And after what happened last year and where they are now, they were just on a very high place. And now that they're starting to come back down to reality, they're having to find themselves as a team and figure out how they want to finish the season. And I'm sure they don't want to lose 3 in a row.
Oh, no. I don't know how many teams do. But at the same time, you kind of got to wonder, this is a very angry Texas Tech team. You got to, like you just said, they don't want to go 0-3 in the last 3 weeks, and they're going to be at home. You know that crowd's going to be loud because they have to understand that a 3rd straight loss will very well take them out of the rankings. And this is a team that was thinking they could, make an undefeated season a couple weeks ago.
Not only that, not only is Texas Tech's crowd, by K-State players' admission, one of the rowdiest that they've gone to from players who have been there. It's also their senior day, and which seems early for a senior day.
It is early,
but this is their last home game, so they really need this win. They really want it, and it's just unfortunate that K-State has to be their senior day opponent. Texas Tech, they've been racking up a bunch of points on a lot of teams, and we're familiar with teams doing this in the Big 12. It's kind of become the mantra of teams in the Big 12 is to throw the ball all over the place, spread the field, score a lot of points, run quick plays. And K-State's kind of gotten a little used to seeing that, but it still doesn't take the edge, the nervousness out of your initial reaction when you see those teams line up on paper. When you see a conservative team like Kansas State lining up against a very spread offense like Baylor or Texas Tech or West Virginia even. Well,
and I think that's the thing about Tech is that, they've always kind of been the same team they've been for the past 10 years. They've always been a very spread-happy offense, a team that's going to try to rack the points on you and maybe suffer a little bit on defense, but they've always thought that as long as we score 50 points, it doesn't matter if the defense allows 40. problem with that, though, is that when you don't score those 40 or 50 points and your defense hasn't gotten any better, you're going to be in trouble. And this is a tough K-State defense they're about to face. This is a K-State defense that is, on a high right now. They've had 2 back-to-back really good games, and you got to think that they are licking their chops a little bit, seeing kind of a wounded Texas Tech awaiting them.
Yeah, well, I would like to say I was a spectator, but after talking to the players today, they sounded like they're taking this just the same way they take any other game. That they don't look at a team and groan when they see a high-powered offense is next on the schedule. That it's just a game, and so I think we're just going to see a typical Bill Snyder game. Try to play conservative and try to keep the score low and try to do ball control and hopefully have more points at the end of the game.
I think the great thing about this matchup, though, is just the fact that Snyder's coaching against a guy and coach in Cliff Kingsbury, who in 2008, not that long ago, especially in Bill Snyder years, was quarterbacking for Texas Tech. So that's going to be kind of interesting to watch.
Yeah, and we know Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State, the head coach there, he's a man, he's 40.
I'm a man, I'm 40!
From his famous rant. He was a player.
We're all aware of the rant.
He was a player that also played against Bill Snyder.
Yeah.
So this is not new for Bill Snyder, but I mean, it just seems like the more years that pass, the more guys that you remember, throwing passes against Kansas State that are now coaching against him.
Right, and and that's a big reason why this Texas Tech team is the same one it was when he was quarterbacking there, because it was that way then, and you got to know that's ingrained in this system. And he's a quarterback's guy. He was over at Houston.
A&M.
He was Houston first, where he groomed Case Keenum, who we now see in the NFL.
He's doing good
and doing pretty well. And then he goes to Texas A&M and makes Johnny Manziel a national name in less than a year.
The first freshman ever win the Heisman.
Right.
How much of that is the coach?
Right.
Yeah.
All right, let's look at Texas Tech's quarterback and Davis Webb. So far for the season, he's 185 out of 300, 2,237 yards, 15 touchdowns, but 9 interceptions. Not the greatest ratio out there. Maybe not one that they're used to if you think back to the Graham Harrell days, where by this time he'd already had about 30 touchdowns.
Yeah, but I mean, they're still scoring a lot of points. If you look at that, Kansas, for example, has only been blown out twice this year, and that was one of their blowouts, Texas Tech and Baylor. So you got to put those 2 teams in kind of the same basket as Baylor and Texas Tech. They both have high-powered offenses that you just got to watch out for.
And let's also remember, this is probably one of the biggest tests right now for this K-State team in general. I think now fans are going to see what kind of team this truly is. West Virginia and Iowa State back-to-back, 2 of the bottom teams in the Big 12. This is more of a contender, and it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, and if Kansas State manages to win this, they'll just be 1 game away from bowl eligibility, and they're coming home for that game against Texas Christian. So that would be really, really big for them to get this one on the road, considering that this is a ranked team on the road.
Yeah, it's not a season that K-State's vying for a national championship, but they're still quite alive in the bowl race, and if they run the table at 8-4, they would get a pretty decent bowl. K-State hoops, they're just about to get started. I think both teams are pretty close to having all their exhibition games done. You're at Midnight Madness. It's going to be a different year for each team, I think. I think a lot of people are really not sure what type of men's team we're going to have, but I think a lot of people are pretty sure about the women's team, and they look strong. But we don't know until they play the games.
Well, that's the thing. They're both the men and the women kind of have a similar dynamic going on here. Is Kansas State lost Angel Rodriguez to transfer this year, so we were kind of hurting on point guard. In order to replace him, they brought in Marcus Foster, a freshman from Texas, who was playing in a state championship game. He got MVP in a bunch of tournaments.
Right.
He's a very, very, very skilled player. And we're going to see as the season progresses that he's going to be an integral part of the Kansas State offense.
Well, he has some big shoes to fill, though. I mean, let's not we get guys every year out of high school that look great in high school, but it's such a different, pace of game, everything. It's why it's such a crapshoot most of the time. You never know, but Foster has looked good. He's been one of 3 freshmen to lead K-State actually just this past week. Friday night they beat Pitt State 75-54, and 3 freshmen, including Foster in that mix, contributed 38 of those 75 points. So it's going to be a young look for the Wildcats this year.
I'll tell you what the big surprise to me was, looking at that stat line from that exhibition game, was that Shane Southwell didn't start the game. But on top of that, he did get the most minutes. He tied for the most minutes played in the game.
Well, I think it's clear that he's going to be a guy that could have easily been a practice sort of thing. Bruce Weber, I'm sure. Southwell's a guy that likes to have fun.
Now this is a story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down.
Sometimes you got to wonder if maybe he had a little too much fun in practice. Like, got to teach him a little quick lesson.
Yeah, well, there's one other thing that reminded me of is when Cartier Martin came off the bench for Bob Huggins. He was a starter and clearly the best player on the team, but they would bench him to start the game. And then they'd bring him in when players got a little tired after 2 or 3 minutes and let him score easier. So that could be another situation too, but we haven't really seen Bruce Weber do anything like that. So we'll find out this year, I guess.
Well, and we have some pretty big games in the next couple months for K-State on the men's side. They will play Gonzaga in Wichita, and
we're aware of what Gonzaga did last year.
Right.
They went very far in the NCAA tournament.
Right, and Gonzaga is still a good team this year. They're ranked 15th in the country, at least for preseason rankings are concerned. They got beat pretty handedly on the road at Gonzaga last year, but you got to know that the fan support in Wichita and at Interest Bank Arena is going to help. But it's one of those things. I don't think anybody can make a comfortable prediction on whether you're a diehard K-State fan or not. Gonzaga ranked number 15, very young K-State team.
Yeah. And there's still a lot of uncertainty about how good of a coach Bruce Weber is because he hasn't really got his guys in here yet. And that was the big concern last year, is that everyone said when he got brought in that he was a very good coach, X's and O's, and he can game coach and he's very good, but that can he bring in his own guys that can also execute what he wants to happen and be successful. And we'll find out this year how that is, because it looks promising. We do have a lot of freshmen coming in, and there were a couple that didn't qualify that would have really helped, so our team's a lot smaller than we were anticipating. But Marcus Foster really looks to be the crown jewel of his recruiting class.
And I think Weber still has to think he has a lot of pressure still on him, even though he won a Big 12 championship last season. The way the season ended was not good if you were Bruce Weber. Losing against a lesser opponent in LaSalle in the first game of the NCAA tournament last year. It ends on that terrible shot by Rodriguez behind the backboard. There's a lot of question marks still, I think, and people look at that.
And even though he did win that Big 12 championship, it was shared with Kansas, and he could have outright won that if he had just won any of those final games that he needed to win. And he had beaten Oklahoma State before; he just had to beat them one more time. Things like that.
And of course, you don't want to lose to KU twice. It doesn't matter.
3 times.
3 times, exactly, because it was in the Big 12 tournament as well. So, that's always seems like the true measuring stick for any K-State basketball fan is, can you beat KU at least once?
Yeah.
You don't want to lose to them 3 times.
Yeah. Well, while I got you here, can I get your prediction for who do you think's going to win the conference this year? We have the media picks. Who do you think's going to pick, or who do you think's going to win?
I think you got to. It's between KU and Oklahoma State, and I know that's the way it went down in the media picks as well. But those seem like the more talented teams coming back. They got a lot of leadership coming back, and of course KU just reloads year after year anyway.
So at the end of the day,
I'll go KU. I'll go with the safe pick in KU.
Right, I'm going to write that down. I'm also picking KU as well. How do you think Andrew Wiggins is going to do? He's their big superstar. Do you think he's going to average a bunch of points, or the big superstar they think he's going to?
Well, I don't know if he's going to match the expectations. I mean, there was only one Wilt Chamberlain. Don't try and talk to me like you can clone Wilt Chamberlain. I mean, if you can, that'd be awesome, because hopefully you can clone K-State a Wilt Chamberlain to come to Manhattan. But
just get 5 of them.
Exactly, 5 Wilt Chamberlains. That'd be awesome.
No, that would be a fun game to watch.
It would be. I would watch it.
Yeah.
But until that happens, you know how I am with hypotheticals. To me, I always want to see what they actually do on the floor. Show me the stats, and then I can make those assessments if this guy's Wilt Chamberlain like. But until then, I'm not going to say.
Yeah, and I felt it was a little unfair to Wiggins, to him himself, for everyone to put all this pressure on him and expectations.
Right.
It's like when you get really high expectations of a movie and you go in and you're disappointed, even if it was good.
Right. But K-State is, as far as the media picks are concerned, tied for 5th with OU, which is actually a little better than I thought what the media would do.
Yeah.
I thought the media would put K-State.
It's about where they picked them last year, too.
Right.
And the women's team.
Yeah, let's talk about them.
Last year, they were riddled with injury.
They only had 5 starters. They only had 6 people that could play at one time.
Yeah, on scholarship. And or period. You're just right. Yeah,
right.
All.
Yeah.
And there was some talk. We had heard some rumors that they were actually asking some of the volleyball players if any of them were interested of temporarily suiting up for the basketball team.
Well, because there was a couple of volleyball players last season that had a very good high school basketball career.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at that point for...
It's a very serious question that you're asking.
Yeah. It was definitely that point for Coach Deb Patterson to, look elsewhere because, players need to take a break every once in a while. Yeah. You had all those girls playing nearly a full game each. There's maybe one that didn't have a full game minutes in.
I can't tell you how impressed I was with how they actually finished their season and played through the WNIT and won so many games, nearly winning the whole thing.
Yes.
With only 6 possible players to play.
It was an amazing coaching job by Deb Patterson.
And amazing job by all the players that participated. And so I was very impressed with that. So now you take a lot of those players are returning. And a lot
Except for Brittany Chambers, though. And that's going to be Brittany Chambers is... You look up any K-State women's stat book, you'll see Brittany Chambers' name on the top of about every list for about every stat you can think of.
She pretty much carried that team, too.
Yeah.
But a lot of those girls that were hurt last year that couldn't play, they're good to go now. And she brought in a bunch of freshman recruits, one of which just got done playing for the national Italy team in the offseason.
Spain, actually.
Spain, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was Leticia Romero, who in the last 2 exhibition games for K-State, here's her averages: 20 points, 10.5 rebounds, and she's 10 of 13 from the free throw line. So she's already proving that she may be a freshman. She may be a freshman on paper, but when it comes to her experience, she's not going to be playing like a freshman, I don't think.
Right, the Blake Griffin of women's basketball.
Yeah, she looks good, and the team looks good. I think this could be a very exciting year for K-State women's basketball.
I agree.
Definitely an interesting season ahead for both the men and the women. Both of those seasons tip off this Friday night in Brandledge Coliseum. The men tip off at 8 o'clock against Northern Colorado, and the women will tip off before them at 5:45 against Tennessee State. So we'll know right away kind of how these teams are looking. Yeah, and those are always fun. Moving ahead to our first video feature for the bench, we talked to Manhattan High boys and girls cross-country head coach Susan Melgaris, who just coached the boys team to a state title in 6A. Here we are, 2 of the state champions from the Manhattan High boys track team, Chris Melgaris and Nick Bandy. First off, guys, congratulations. Just your initial thoughts off winning it like you did. Second lowest score in 6A at 27 points.
The initial thoughts were really that, all of our hard work has paid off. We've really had this goal for the better part of 3 years, ever since we didn't make it to state our freshman year. And it's just cool to see everything coming together and for us to be able to win a championship.
Nick,
I was a 7th runner, so when I crossed the line first, I had no idea what the team score would be. I didn't even know that we won, but as soon as I crossed the line, his dad told me, hey, we won a state championship. And I was just kind of in shock at first, and then I kind of talked to the guys and asked them how they did and heard the whole story about it, and I figured our score would be pretty good. And then at the awards ceremony, they said that we got 27 points, which is the 2nd best ever. And that's when it kind of hit me. I was like, wow, that was really impressive. And they said that we beat the team that got the 3rd best score ever was Jim Ryan's team. So when he said that, I was like, wow, we're really going down in history as a good team.
How special is this for you guys, just as seniors, to go out like this?
It means everything to us because it's been our goal. Like we said, we were talking a few days ago, and Nick brought it up that I think we've talked about it every day for this season and even over the summer when we were training. So, it's just there's not a better way to go out than with the state title. So.
Cross country is kind of at its core, kind of an individual sport, but talk about the teamwork that goes into it that people outside maybe wouldn't understand, or if they're not that big of a cross-country follower, that they wouldn't know that's a part of it.
I think when you do it as a team, you are made so much better individually, just because you're not thinking about yourself and you're thinking about the team as a whole. and you forget about worrying, what place you are or, where you are on the team. You just want the team to do better, and so that's what you focus on more, I think.
Yeah, I would say, like I said, it definitely motivates you more. Like during the state race, I was behind those guys, and I could see some of them ahead. I was like, oh, they'd better be winning. Like, we'd better be beating these other teams. And that was just going through my mind a lot during the race. And just over a year, having a team pushes you. Like, if one of us isn't having a bad day, everybody else will push them. And we made each other work hard. And winning a team championship means so much more. Like, I would way rather win a team state championship than myself win the race individually.
Now, were you guys just feeling it that morning? Talk a little bit about before state. Were you feeling good before the race even started?
Yeah, I think the whole season we built up a lot of confidence just because we've been able to perform well at all the meets we've gone to. So really going into the meet, we were confident just because we knew as long as we race like we should and like we have been, there's no reason we shouldn't bring home the title.
All right. Well, Chris Melgaris, Nick Bandy, state champions. Talk about your initial reactions to have such a dominating performance like you guys did.
Stunned. I got congratulated at the top of the hill with about 500 to go. There was another coach up there who said congratulations. It was so clear that we were going to win as long as everybody got to the finish line. And when he initially said that, I was just stunned. And you knew, you wanted it to happen, you think it could happen, but the reality that it's happening now, it's just amazing.
Because I'm sure it's never happened that early before usually.
No. No, you have to go check the board. It's very suspenseful. You go check the board and see the scores. There was none of that. We had so many kids up so close to the front. It was done.
Give us a little background on your cross-country career here. I'm sure this has to be like a top moment out of all your years
This
here.
is a top moment out of all my time, not only coaching but also competing. I can't think of anything better than this. Our girls placed second 3 times. Marley Crush and Brooke Grieger were just a force, a really strong couple of girls, and they pulled others along with them. The most painful from a coaching standpoint, we got second place by 2 points. That means one person passes the right other person and you got the win. And that was tough to take. We got second 3 times with those girls.
And when was that?
That was 2006, 7, and 8. We had a streak of third place or second places. And so, just really being that close to the win and not getting it was tough, and it just made this all the more sweet. And to have a couple of my own kids on the team, as well as, it feels like they're all my kids because they've just been around year in and year out working so hard. I just cannot put into words how incredible it is.
What is the most difficult part of cross country for somebody who's maybe never participated in it?
For them to run, for someone that's not participated to run, I think just being mentally strong. Obviously, you have to put the miles in to get physically strong, but I think just being mentally strong, that you bring it on race day. And like the kids were saying, they were able to do that partly as a result of the confidence that they built throughout the year when they just went out and ran and found themselves, sweeping 7 at the home meet and winning Joplin, winning Rimrock. And so I think that confidence is huge, and mental toughness is just really huge.
We were just talking to your son, Chris. How is it finding that balance between being mom and coach when your son's running?
It's been interesting because you might think that I would be the one that would be talking to him about it at home, and to Chris or to Michael and Kara as well. But there's times when I felt like they're pulling me in, at night, or it's time to go to bed and we start talking about, oh, we can do this, we can do that, and then they pull me as well as me pulling them. I think it's been really special. And Chris said, I went to tell him good night one night. It was either at the beginning of summer conditioning or the beginning of practice. And he said, we're going to get you your first state championship this year. And, they obviously had a talented team. They worked hard, but talented teams that work hard don't always get the title. So for that to actually happen when he said it so early in the game, it really is a dream come true. And I'm so thankful to him and Nick and the others for the hard work they've done.
All right. That'll work for me. Storybook ending for the Manhattan High cross-country team.
And for this week's Picks from the Bench, we go over 5 games, and we pick who we think is going to win, and we'll see who has the better record at the end of the year.
Even though after week 1, we already know who has a better record. This guy.
The first game is Kansas State at ranked Texas Tech. They're number 23 in the country. Who do you got?
I'm gonna go with K-State in this one. I think K-State has proved that they have stepped up their play and they're a much better team from last week. So I'm gonna go K-State, and since we picked a score in this one for tiebreaker purposes, 28-25. It'll be a close one.
I'm going to say same thing, Kansas State. I'm going to go 31-17.
All right, moving on to our next Big 12 game. Number 10 OU at number 6 Baylor.
Yeah, top 10 game. This is a big game. Probably the feature game of the week. Baylor's undefeated. OU only has one loss. It is to Texas at that neutral site. So, that's being said, this is a really, really tough one. I'm probably going to give the home field advantage the winner, so I'm picking Baylor.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to match you actually on this one. I think Baylor's pretty real. I believe in Baylor. I think that offense is just, it's the Oregon of the Big 12. And, I think Baylor will come on top there.
All right. All right. For the next game, we have Kansas versus number 14 Oklahoma State. Now, we're not picking the winner because
we know who's going to win.
All right. we think we know. So
we know who's going to win.
So in that case, we're going to pick against the line, the spread.
Make it interesting.
Yeah, and Oklahoma State is favored in this game by 32 points. They are favored to win this game by 32 points, which is a very, very, very large spread in terms of lines. So,
Oklahoma State
covers.
I think they'll put up like 40, 45 on them. Okay. I go with Oklahoma State.
I'm going to pick against you. This is our different one.
Here we go.
I'm picking Kansas to cover the spread. Now, I'm not saying they're going to win.
Because they're not. They're not.
I'm just saying that they're not going to lose by more than 32 points. Okay.
We'll see. That's why we're doing the picks. Okay, moving on to LSU at Alabama, number 13 at number 1.
Alabama. LSU is the only team that can beat Alabama, I think, remaining on their schedule. And I think I would like that just because I like when there's parity. But Alabama, roll Tide.
Initially I would go with you on that, and actually that was my gut looking at it. But you know what? Just to make it interesting, I'm going to go against you here, even though all evidence says that this is a bad pick, because LSU's 2 losses have been on the road. They lost at Ole Miss and at Georgia, so they've proved that they're not strong on the road, and what worse place to play on the road than Alabama. But at the same time, I also just got this feeling. Going to my gut here.
Go with your gut.
Go with my gut.
Go with your gut.
I got this feeling that Alabama is due for an upset, and I think the only one that could do it is LSU, just because that rivalry is so intense. So we'll go LSU there.
All right. And for our final game, we pick one NFL game, and we would be doing the Kansas City Chiefs, but they are on the bye, so we know they're going to win that week.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to pick the next most interesting game, I think, which is the Dallas Cowboys at the New Orleans Saints.
And it's a Sunday night game, too, and those games. When you got the primetime lights on, it just kind of mixes everything up. But, this is a Cowboys team that almost lost to Minnesota earlier this week. But then again, the Saints are just coming off a loss against the Jets, against a quarterback in Geno Smith who didn't really play that well. So, this is more of a toss-up than you might think. Maybe initially you go with the Saints, but I'm going to stick with the Saints. I'm going to say all that and stick with the Saints because they're too tough at home.
And I'm going to go against you and pick the Dallas Cowboys. I think they're going to win on the road. I feel like they're heating up, and I feel like they're going to have a decent tail end of the season. So I'm picking the Dallas Cowboys.
All right. Well, we'll find out. That's why we do these. But last and certainly not least, it's time for that big old beast cat y'all love. It's time for Cuddle's picks. Cuddles goes to the dishes. Thought about it for a second. Sniffing Texas Tech. Still not sure And it's the Red Raiders for Cuddles. All right, episode 2 in the books. We survive again.
Yeah. I think it's better than the first, and hopefully the next 98 get even better.
Absolutely. For Cuddles, for myself, Brady Bowman, and for Jeremy Roberts, this has been another episode of The Bench.
Brought to you by BriggsAuto.com and Commerce Bank.
Put us in, Coach!
All that fuddy-duddy.
So maybe all camos next year?
No. Give that mic to somebody else.